here. Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha May. I use the pronouns she and her. And first, thank you so much for the presentations. I've only been able to see the last two, but I think being a participant is probably more helpful than I will be in my presentation. The title is Navigating Alternative Assessment in Multi-Sections Mathematics Courses as a Contract Faculty Member. So that's a bit of my context. And I'll share a little bit about my context and some of what I've been doing. But the whole premise of this presentation is I feel like I'm at this point where I've actually been moving backwards, not forwards. So some of the alternative assessment approaches I've used, I've taken them out and feel very sad for various reasons. And so I'm trying to figure out how to put them back in or do things differently. And already I'm so excited by some of what all of you are doing and learning from you. So thank you. So as I said, I'll share a little bit of my teaching context and some of the alternative assessment and ungrading practices. And I'm looking forward to the session following mine to learn more about what you're doing as well. And then I'm hoping for a bit of a discussion on challenges and rewards of alternative assessment. I'm sure you will have a lot to share. So it may be less you asking questions and you getting an opportunity to share, but you can also ask questions as well. So the main courses that I teach are first year multi-sectioned proof courses in mathematics as well as for computer science. And I'm a contract faculty member and I teach with teaching assistants. So we're a teaching team that engages in supporting these courses. So one course called Math 1200 Problems, Conjectures, and Proofs is required for all mathematics and statistics majors and is designed for a small group, so 35 to 40 students maximum with opportunity for small group work, tutorial type work, as well as some oral presentations. And then the other course is Math 1090, Introduction to Logic for Computer Science. And this is required for all computer science and computer engineering majors. And there are many sections running of each of these courses. This one is more students, so 150 to 200 students. So different approaches with different sizes of classes, but the key is that they're first year multi-sectioned proofs courses. And then from my own context, I've had varied approaches to multi-sectioned courses, and this has some impact on sometimes when I've taken things out, it's given the more coordinated versus less coordinated. So if there's no coordination or there's no coordinator, I should say, right? So there's not one person coordinating all the sections, then that means I make all the decisions in the course design. So there's a bit more freedom there. But it does also come with challenges in terms of one I'll talk about in a moment. One example we had where it was coordinated with an alternative assessment, which then meant it was a little bit easier for the teaching assistant, and there was some coordination there. So the teaching assistant was the same for both sections, so that was helpful. And then I would say I haven't had like a lot of coordination. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I actually mean that in a positive way. So a lot can be really constraining, perhaps. So I would say there's a lot of things that I can do in any section that I teach. So the most coordinated impact is really the types of assessments, and the weights are predetermined. So some of what I have tried. So in the Problems, Conjectures, and Proofs course, this is Math 1200, the top one here, for all math and stats major. So last winter, I have been working with the same teaching assistant for many years. And sometimes I teach this course and sometimes I don't, but they've been a pretty consistent teaching assistant with this course. And so when we met last winter, it was like the first time I was teaching again in person after a period of time where it was remote, and they had had some experience being back in person, and we had started teaching in person together, and then had a transition of remote, and then we're back in person. And so I was asking sort of what they were finding about their experience and what we should change. And their proposal was to do a bit of specifications grading with the assignment, so opportunities for the students to write proofs and help them with their proof writing. And so the teaching assistant in particular proposed that we have fewer assignments, but they have two parts. So they complete the assignment as they normally would, but then they get feedback, no grade, just feedback, sort of an identification, sort of the specifications. Did they meet the specification or did they not, right? What were the goals of the assignment? Did they meet those or not? And not so much in a yes, no, but offering, a question to help them expand on their idea, maybe think about bringing in a definition, or something like that. So pieces of feedback to help them with their communication. That was essentially the feedback that the teaching assistant provided, and their experience was that and it is true that this is a place where they're working on their communication and learning about how to write a proof for the first time. So that's always something they're learning, but they found that they needed more help with that. And so this proposal of offering sort of feedback in between, and then them resubmitting their proofs for the grading of the assignment. And so in the winter, there were two sections of the course, one taught by me, contract faculty member, and one taught by a postdoctoral fellow, and then the teaching assistant as a graduate student in the department. And so we collaborated, we designed the assignments together, and the teaching assistant was able to have the exact same assignments to provide feedback. They thought it would be faster than it was. So they did need a bit of help in some of the grading a little bit later. So we certainly took that for future to consider how we might do this, spread the load a little bit. But in the fall, just this past fall, when I taught this course, it was a different group of individuals and a coordinator, and a different teaching assistant as well. And so I wasn't able to implement this in the same way, and am sad about that. And so trying to consider how to bring it back. And I think the key would be finding ways to do it maybe in the first couple, and supporting the teaching assistant with doing this work. So anyway, that's a lesson learned as a way to bring it back, because I got stuck in some of these administrative pieces. For the other course, Math 1090, which I'm currently teaching, and have taught many times. So one activity assignment was that the students would create their own review problem. So there's a midterm and the final exam, which is sort of required as part of a multi-section course. And one feature of this course is that the textbook doesn't have a lot of practice problems. And so this was an assignment I thought would be helpful for everyone, because they could be creative. And this was one of my favorite things about this assignment, is that students were very creative in the construction of their problems. So you could see their personalities coming out in creating the review problem. And I also asked them to submit a private reflection. So the review problems were posted in a discussion forum, so everyone had access and could, use them as review problems. And the one note was that anyone completing any of the review problems also had to kind of evaluate whether the problem posed was correct as posed, or if any changes had to be made to it. So there was extra sort of skill development, because self-evaluation is really helpful for writing a midterm. If they can check what's happening, then that's a useful skill for them. So that was part of it. And then the other part was that the students submitted a private reflection. So this wasn't for the class to see, but an opportunity for them to reflect on connecting their program to the course. Why is this an effective, useful review problem? How does it connect to what we're doing in the course? Yeah, essentially that. So that's one thing that's exciting. And then proficiency quizzes is another, which is sort of like specifications grading, in that just in the they have this quiz open for a period of 1 week, and they can retry with a unique version of the quiz as many times as they want. And the key is really focusing on supporting their learning, as opposed to assessing that they know what what's happening or what's being asked in the quiz, but instead using it as an opportunity to try out the problems, pause, think about it, do a little bit more study, reach out to me or their peers or teaching assistants to ask questions, to focus on the learning process, and then they can retry. So trying to focus less on the grading, so a bit of an ungrading process here. And so the proficiency quizzes is easy to keep going because they're, so it's not for everything in the course, but it's on sort of the foundational pieces where we can use sort of automatic grading type tools for their learning process. And for the review problem, I've kind of switched. So this is still something they can do, but it's a collection of things they choose. And so fewer of them are choosing this option. And so trying to find a way to make it, attractive to those that, were really creative to identify that this is really something helpful. So that's all I wanted to share. And now I'm opening the floor for discussion, ideas, questions. It could be any of these topics here that we want to talk about. You may have your own topic of discussion that you want to engage in. So that's that.
Thanks, Natasha. I'm just going to the chat. We have lots of people who at this time of day need to leave, and that's
Of course.
the taping of, these things. So it's just great. Let's see.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Did you find any differences between the two cohorts of students? So, yeah, there are two cohorts of students with each course. I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. There we go. So I think for sure in the winter versus the fall, where we had the opportunity for them to get feedback and then resubmit, for sure there was a difference in their communication. I think what's interesting is that by the end of the course, they've had opportunity for feedback from assignment to assignment. So by the end of the course, their ability to communicate is about the same, but along the process. So like the midterm, for example, there's a large difference because they haven't had enough experience. So, and there were, so the difference was 4 assignments with the resubmission versus 5 assignments, right? So there was only 1 extra assignment. So it's interesting, right, to be able to give extra feedback. It feels like much more of a useful process. Okay, and apologies to connect to your question. So specifically between the computer science and other math students. So the two courses are quite different in terms of, so in the Math 1090 Introduction to Logic for Computer Science, it's sort of proofwriting for a computer versus in Math 1200, it's like mathematical proofwriting, sort of more narrative. And so it's difficult to compare. They're sort of different outcomes. So one in Math 1200 is more a communication piece, where in 1090 it's a bit more focused on the logic, I guess. But both of them have the logic piece there. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to compare between the two courses, and separately they have 2 separate groups of students. But what I think is helpful about your question is trying to find ways to engage in both practices in both courses. And apologies, I'm just looking off to the side because that's where I put the chat window. Shadia, thank you for bringing up self-assessment. How did students react, engage with it? Did you investigate its effectiveness within your program? So no, I haven't done any like formal investigation. So no formal research in that. But so anecdotally, I think it was challenging at first, and a little bit outside of what they're used to, in terms of they're used to like, here's an assignment, get the right answer, and here's the right answer. And I take a more like, let's work on the process and the problem solving and all the skills. And so that's how the sort of self-assessment reflective process, like was talked about in the last presentation, I find really helpful. And so it takes a bit to talk that through and to provide support and clear guidelines and all of that. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Natasha, very much. The practical focus of what you do and is really beneficial. Do you know that it's so real? It really resonates, I think, with lots of people in the roles they play. So
Thank you.
the roles they fulfill. Thank you. I can't talk anymore.